How you doing? You can say your name.
My name is Joaquina Williams.
Okay, you can tell us who your son was.
My son was Taji Simon Jr., but kind of like the community knew him as Marley G.
Yes, ma'am. You can tell a little bit about yourself.
Myself?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm originally from Marksville,
Yep.
Louisiana, but I didn't grow up here. I grew up in Alexandria.
Okay.
I went to school in Alexandria. And I moved down here. Marley was 3 years old when I moved back to Marksville. And my purpose for moving back to Marksville was because I really grew up like in a tough side of Alexandria, and my purpose for moving back home was to raise my children in a more country-like environment, which, you know, it ended up being total opposite, you know. So, I mean, but when they was younger, it was good living here as opposed to living in the city because they finished country life. But I guess, you know, as time passed, things changed. Even in the small
That's how to get older and all that.
Yeah.
Get in the streets. You can tell what time of kid Marley G was growing up.
He was a good child. Matter of fact, he was my third son. I had 4 children. He was my third son, and he had a younger sister. And he actually was my best child. From pre-K till he graduated at 17. Never got rolled up, never got detention, never got in trouble. Like, he was the quiet one, the good one. I actually never had to spank him before. The others were hell on wheels, but Marlon was completely the opposite.
So he never got a whooping?
Never got a spanking. I never had to. Like, he never wanted to be in trouble or get in trouble, and he never gave me trouble.
He started rapping. You know what age that was?
He started rapping because I remember, as a matter of fact, his rap name then, he called himself Gutter Boy. And if you would go look on the YouTube videos, it's the YMC Boys, and it was him and 2 other his childhood friends. They would do rap, and a matter of fact, I listened to his song the other day, and you know, his little voice was so good. He was like a Gutter Boy, and I remember when I heard of him rapping, I was in shock because he was always so timid. I mean, even though he was quiet and didn't give trouble, he always demanded attention. You know, I noticed that even from a child, even from when I first had him in the hospital, he was a good-looking child. He was a handsome child, and a lot of the nurses noticed him, and from then on, he was always noticed. Like, I guess you could say his looks caught attention to a lot of people. You know, he had the good hair and the pretty boy looks, and my nickname for him was Pretty Boy. And so he was used to being noticed. He was a prom king in 6th grade, and in 8th grade he was prom king. And I remember in high school, the football coach had cut out the prom king and prom king situation. He said he wanted him to focus more on football, but I'm sure he would have been prom king. But he was voted most popular, most good looking, most comedic, so he always demanded attention. But I was still surprised when I heard him rapping. But he was like, I would say he was 11 when he was rapping with Gutter Boy. So he started like 11.
You had know who motivated him?
He always would say that his idol was Boosie. A matter of fact, like maybe 8 months before he passed, he had did a little short film on Instagram, and I look at it often because his smile that day, it was him and his mentor, one who introduced him to rap a lot, which was Chris Bacon, which he grew up in Marksville, Louisiana too. And even from the time Marley was about 3 years old, when Chris Bacon, he used to play basketball, he would come down. I remember he had a car, and he would come down, and Marley was around 3, and he was like, "Take me for a ride."
Oh, so they've been to each other?
Yeah, since he was approximately 3 years old.
Okay.
3.5 years old, Chris had he would come down here on the weekends, and he was friends with Taji's daddy, and he would come down, and Marley would always say, "Take me for a ride, Mr. Chris." So from 3 until he grew up, he was always around him, and it's like kind of like a big brother role. And then sometimes like a fatherly role, because his daddy really was more into the street life and spending time with him. You know what I'm saying? I took up more of both the mother and father role for him. But it was definitely Bootsy. He would always, and like I said, he made that. He was like, he was with Bootsy and Chris, and he was like, Bootsy gonna put me in a movie, and I'll never forget that smile. Like he smiled from ear to ear, and he was like lit up like a Christmas tree. And he always said that was his idol. Even though I don't really go to concerts and stuff like that, usually when Bootsy has his Bootsy bands and stuff, like I go in his spirit of him being there because I know what he meant to me.
What do you say he was going to achieve out of his rap career? Did he tell you?
I remember he would always tell me. I remember when he started at 11 at Good Boy. You know, and I thought it would probably just ease off, but he didn't. He continued to push on forward, and he graduated at 17, and he went to Lafayette to college, paid for an apartment and everything, and he came home maybe about 4 months after he got to school. He was like, "Mama, school not for me. You know, that's not what I want to do. I want to rap." And I was very disappointed and angry because he was a very smart child. Yep. School came easy to him. He never had to study. I knew that he could have been anything he wanted to be, but I knew that I couldn't make him stay in college. He said, "Mama, I want to follow my dream. I want to be a rapper." And I really was kind of against it because of this, because of what happened to him, because I knew that with the fame came jealousy. That just as many people that would love him, and he did have a lot of people that loved him, that it had just as many people that envied him and want to be him. And I also knew that he didn't just have the talent and the voice, but he had the looks, you know, and I knew that people could be intimidated by a person. And so I kind of was against it a lot. And I would say about 9-10 months before he passed, he said, "Mama," he said, "you know, I wish that you would." I did go to all his shows. I went to watch him. Not to watch him because I had seen him numerous times. I went to watch him to make sure that he was safe. That's what I went for. But he was like, "I wish you would support me because that's what I want to do. It's my dream." So from that day on, I would post him like 2 or 3 times a week, and I would put, you know, "your biggest fan." I made sure and I put that, and I told him, I said, "and I'm going to support you from now on." But I always worried. What happened to him was what I didn't want him to become a rapper for, was his demise. And I also knew that I didn't worry about him when he was in Houston. I knew in my heart that if he was taken from me, that it would be in his own hometown, which he called Marleyville. The people around here call this Marleyville, USA. I knew that it would be the people closest around him, you know, that would be more jealous of him.
So when he moved to Houston, what year that was?
So he moved to Houston. He got killed at 18. So him and my oldest son, 2 years before, 2 years and maybe 7 months before he got killed. And the reason they really pushed him to move to Houston even more. He was trying to go there to follow his rap career. He had graduated that May of 2016. He was 17 years old. And that August, him and his brother, who was 2 years older than him, Trey, they went to this club, which was in Bunkie, Louisiana, and they were trying to promote stopping the violence between the communities. And when they got out, somebody said, "Which one of y'all Marley G?" And it caused a big humbug. It was him and his brother, Trey, and one other friend. And it had people bystanders around there. They said it was over 20 guys. And long story short, Trey, somebody in the crowd handed him a gun. And he started to shoot. And he had shot 2 people from
the oldest son.
My son, Trey. And it's kind of like in a small community like this, it's all about who you know. He did shoot 2 people, but the charge should have been reckless use of a firearm. He was like in a riot type situation, but just so happened, one of them that he shot was of authority's son, so they gave him 12 years. 12 years, and on 12 years, he got to do 9 years and 4 months, so he still got 6 more years. And pretty much as soon as Trey got that time, he just straight moved to Houston. And I can remember when I asked Trey why he shot, and he was like, "They was going to take my brother's life." So he in jail for saving his brother's life, but they took his life anyway.
Alright, so we can talk about the day he passed away, or the last time you talked to him. So
he came down on usually like maybe the last 4 or 5 months of his life. When he did come, he didn't come to Marksville. He came with Chris or with his manager Christian, or he had did a concert maybe 4 months before he died, and he came with his entourage with J. Chris Jr. and Bob Tops, the Rap-A-Lot family. Yeah. So that night when he came, he didn't tell them that he was coming. He came alone. He didn't come with Chris or anybody. He left, I think, like 3-something in the morning. His girlfriend said he got up out the bed. He had a homeboy who had got out of jail 3 days before, and he had been texting him to come pick him up. Like, he wanted to be up there with them in Houston. And I hadn't slept at home that night. I had slept at my boyfriend's, and my daughter was there. And she called me early the next morning, and she said, Mom, TJ here. And she said, he said he was going to get him some rest. He was tired. So it's just so happened, this house where we were, this the day that I saw him at. I was across the street. He hung here a lot. This is one of his best friend's houses, and I was across the street. It happened to be his sister's homecoming night, and that's when I saw him the next morning, which was October 13th. It was Friday, and I drove up over here, and he walked to the car, and I was like, Dad, what you doing here? I would call him Dad. He was like, oh, Ma, I just came. I'm in and out. I came to pick up, the homeboy. And he was like, I'm going to give me some rest. I'm tired. And he came and slept. But that night, I had got home from a wedding reception, and I heard he was knocking on the door, but I couldn't hear him. I was in the shower. So he called, and he was like, Mom, let me in. So it was nobody home with me and him. I let him in. We had 2 showers. He took one bathroom. I took another. He came out. I can remember that night, the last moments that I spent with him. He was full of life. He was different to me that night than on the average night. He had been drinking. He liked his Hennessy. I could tell that he was feeling good. So I'm sitting in the front room, and he running back and forth in the hall. He was like, yeah, Mom, I'm finna go to Burrell's. I'm finna go show Marley some love. I'm going to give me a hood rag. And he was just like so excited. And he had asked me for a MGM shirt, a certain one, a black and white one, matter of fact. It's like, I need a black and white shirt to put on. And he had gave me his sister one, and I was like, she lost mine and hers too. And the Marley that I knew, him and her, they were like all in water. She was his trigger point. He was 19 when he passed, and she was 17. She was a senior in high school. But she was his trigger point. She is who blew him off. Like, they fought and fussed all the time. The Marley that I knew, when I would have said that his sister took his shirts, would have been like, oh, she touched everything. That night he was like, Ma, that's okay. Like, he was so timid and different. And I said, well, I got a different color shirt. And I helped him put his shirt on. I played in his head. All of that. Usually he would have been like, Ma, don't touch me. I'm grown. But I remember thinking he was different than I usually remember him to act. But he was full of life and he was happy. And he was like, I'm going to show Marley some love. And I said, okay, Dad. And I said, I love you. And he went to walk out the door. And at that instant, something told me to get up. I always told my kids I love them before they left out. And he had opened the door. He had on a red Supreme book sack on his back. And he had changed into he had on some black Air Force Ones and some gray sweatpants and a gray hoodie. And he said he wanted the MGM shirt in case he got hot up there. I walked to the door and I said, TJ, and he stopped. And he took off his chain. I had never saw the MGM chain before, which was taken from him when he was killed. He took it off and he put it in my hand. He's like, look, Ma, you never saw my chain. I think he might have had got it maybe a month and a half before, because when he was down, he had a month and a half before he didn't have it. He took it off and he put it in my hand, and I was like, it's nice, Dad. And he put it back on. And I said, I love you, Dad. Be careful. And he turned around. Like, my last memory of him was standing to the door, and he was like, I'm going to be all right, Mom. That was his last words.
And that club you mentioned, that's the club that happened?
The club that happened at Burrell's, and then when he left, my boyfriend came and picked me up, and I was like, he happens to be his godfather. And I said, you see TJ here? And he was like, nah. So I went to his house, which was 2 streets from the club, 2 streets down from the club. And he was like, I'm going to play shoot pool a little while with my brother. And I told him, I said, watch my baby. But Marley was on stage. And Kurt, my boyfriend, his godfather, was clean across the club at the pool table. So he wasn't nearby him when he got shot. And but my godchild was there on stage with him, and you know, she told me the events that transpired, and it was somebody. People say they asked because my dad is a McGlory, and the boy who killed him is a McGlory. But he was a childhood friend. As a matter of fact, we lived 6 houses from this house, and his killer lives 6 houses this way. This is around cul-de-sac, and we lived here 12 years together. He was good friends with my oldest son, and he also was friends with Marley. He was in one of Marley's videos like 2 months before, and but we are different set of McGlories. Like when he killed him because it was the last name. There was like he killed, but it was a different set. But on the night that he killed my child, he also killed his mama's sister's child. Dang. But it was in the act. Like my godchild was there. You know, people was like he didn't do anything. She said, Nanny, I was standing right on side of Marley, and she said the boy walked in the club with some earphones in his ear and went in the corner of the club, like directly across from the stage where she was standing next to Marley, and that he came on stage and he stood behind Marley. My baby did have a gun wrapped around his leg at the time, but he didn't see any danger. This boy was like quiet, timid. Nobody knowed him. It was just little Jimmy from the neighborhood. Nobody noticed him and nobody paid attention to him. He was always different, like timid to himself, quiet. He was a strange child, if I had to explain to you, you know, like. And she said he walked behind him, and she said she heard a pop. She heard a pop, and then TJ pushed him. He pushed out the way, and he took off running. And she said when he took off running, the boy just picked up the gun and kept shooting. She said that his cousin jumped in the front. I guess, you know, he was like, well, that's Marley, what you doing? And so he shot him in the stomach one time in the act. He shot my baby through his back and went through his heart. And when he ran, he continued. She said he shot the gun until it was empty. He shot him on the stage through his back and it went through his heart. And when he was running, he shot him through his lower back and it went through his stomach. And, my boyfriend is the one that called me. He called and he was like, it's TJ, he shot it up. And I didn't ask him any questions. I didn't ask him where he was shot at or if he okay, because I knew at that moment that he was gone. Like I felt it in my heart. And when I got there, people was like, don't let her go in, he gone. But you know, I had to see him. I had to go to him. He was just there laying, you know. And when I turned the corner and I saw where he was shot at, I knew that he had lasted long and that he was gone. But one of my good friends, one of my girlfriends, just so happened her spot that she saw was where the women's bathroom, which is where he died. And she was with him when he passed, and she said that, you know, that it wasn't like you see on TV, that he wasn't panicked, he wasn't, you know, she said that he was calm, you know, and that she told him that I was on the way, but unfortunately I didn't get there, you know, before he left. But I think he may have lived 5 minutes after he was shot. It pierced his head off, so it killed him almost instantly. And they caught his killer the same night, and he's been incarcerated since, which has been 2 years and 10 months. And you know, I've been back and forth to trials, but I guess it would be the final trial date would be December 7th.
That's the real trial.
Yeah, that's for the next trial. But I've been going back and forth to pre-trials since then. And he's never admitted. I went and saw him 3 weeks after he killed my child. I had to know why. I had to ask him why. And I went and saw him and I was like, why did you take TJ? And he just played like dumb. No man, I didn't kill TJ. TJ was my friend. Trey was my best friend. He just told me that he didn't do it. And he's never really admitted if he's doing it up until like 8 months ago. The DA called me and it was like he wants to make a deal. And he'll say if he did it. And it was some bullshit at his time. So I was like, no, I'm not going to make a deal with my child's life. You know, I think he deserves to have a trial. And if I had to say why his life was taken, I would say it wasn't because it was Saji. His life was taken because he was Marley G. Because of who he was and because who he was becoming. Because I said with the fame comes the ending. And that night he wanted to be seen. That night in general in Burrell's on a regular Saturday night, it's 30 to 40 people. The night he got killed, it was almost 400 people. Because he had put on the media that he was going. So people went to see him.
Alright. So, you think he killed him like out of hate, you say?
Yeah. I think that if I had to, I guess I'll never really know since the boy didn't. I know that he didn't do him anything. You know what I'm saying? If I had to say why he left this earth, it wasn't because he was tragic. It was because he was Marley G. You know, like the envy and the hate. Yeah, it was. I think that happens a lot to up and coming rappers, and that it happens in general in their own community. You know, he was friends with him. We grew up, and he grew up in the same community with him. I don't really know what triggered him that night, but you know, as far as I know, like he didn't do him anything or anything happened to transpire. I just think sometimes people, you know, they'll be right by you and in the limelight, but in the same time they'll be wishing to be you. You know what I'm saying? And I wish one day that he would really tell me what made him do it. I knew it wasn't anything that Marley did, but I mean, I can pretty much come to my own assumption if it was nothing else, because the boy was never. He was, how I said that from the time I had Marley, he was noticed and the center of attention. Well, the boy that killed him was the total opposite. I'm just saying, like, nobody noticed, nobody paid attention to him. He was quiet, timid. He wasn't a good-looking child. He wasn't outgoing. You know, he was different into himself. You know, and I guess that's really the kind of people that you gotta watch. Even though Marley had a gun on him, he never saw it coming. He never felt threatened. And the boy that killed him was like, you know, 5 feet tall and 105 pounds. You know, he wasn't a big guy, and he never saw it coming. He never saw his death coming to him.
And what do you think would be your best memory you have of this?
Probably the fondest memories that I have of him would be just the times we spent together, the times we spent with his sister. I had 4 children, and but he was a mama's boy. He was more into me. Like I love all my children the same, but he reciprocated the most.
The one that stood
back
out.
to me, yeah. He reciprocated. Mom, what you doing? Mom, what you got on? Take that off. Like how much he was into me. Like the way he always wanted to make sure that I was okay and what I was doing. Even from a child, he was clean to me most. You know, the relationship that we had.
What you tell other mothers that lost a child to gun violence?
Well, since I lost Marley, then I felt like the only thing that I could do to keep his memory alive and also to stop other mothers. And I've had childhood friends who've lost their children to gun violence.
Yeah,
at least 4 that I went to high school with, and I've come around so many people since then, and I try to stay in I had did an event. I definitely fought to close Burritos. I closed the club 10 years before my baby was killed. A guy from around here who was in college for basketball, was a good kid, didn't get any trouble. He got murdered at that club. And when he got murdered there, they put metal detectors and stuff, and you know, but they got complacent. You know, so the night my child got killed, it wasn't no metal detectors in the club and stuff like that. Now, I knew at that moment when he got killed in that club, I didn't blame them for his death, but I knew that if they would have had metal detectors, he wouldn't have got killed in that club. So I fought, and I made sure that it didn't happen to another person's child. But and since then, also after closing the club, like you know, we're a matter of fact tomorrow we're doing a mother's a gun violence, bringing awareness to gun violence in the community. Where myself and 4 other mothers are going to speak, and I did an event a month after I lost him, and I did an event about 7 months ago. So anytime anybody asks me to come out and speak about gun violence and speak about Marley, then I do, because if I could at least, I mean, because I guess you could say I got it both ways. So I got a child doing 12 years, and I got a child in the grave for gun violence. So, I mean, that's the only 2 things can happen with guns, is that you can lose your life to the system, or you can lose your life to the graveyard. And so I can look at it from both perspectives. So if I could reach one kid, one teenager, one grown man in the audience to make them understand that that's not the way that, that we taking each other's lives, that the black on black violence isn't the answer, then I think that that's pretty much my purpose in life. My purpose for Marley now is to save somebody else from going through when I go through that.
Yeah, man. Let's go on and wrap it up. He got any documentary, new music coming out?
He does have some unreleased music. I have been talking to Chris about some of the music that he hadn't released yet, but like, to tell you the truth, this past maybe 4 months, I've just been able to listen to Marley's music, period, like any of his music. So it took me a long time to come out that shell to listen to his music, waiting on thinking about his other music that that he had before. And his brother and his sister asked me about it, and I talked about it with Chris. So maybe in the near future, pretty soon, I would like to let listeners hear the music that they hadn't heard before. But I hear his music all the time, places I go, not just here, and all around. And I also keep his memory alive by selling his MGM gear. Yeah, he would where he was selling the MGM gear before he left me, and since then I see it everywhere. California, New York, West Virginia. I've even sung out of the country before, and I'm just amazed at how many people he touched by his music. And usually when they ask me, they send me these paragraphs of like how he's touched them, and they always send me pictures of them in his gear. So I still keep his memory alive with his merchandise, his Marley Gang military merchandise that people order from me, and I send out headbands, t-shirts, sweatpants, and that's my way of kind of keeping. Sometimes I'm like, I can't make them anymore, and then people be like, I want to wear Marley to this, I want my family to take a picture of him, and then I feel like that it's my obligation. That's my way of keeping him in. And I'll go all over the place, and I'll see them wearing his MGM gear. I think that he likes it. I think he loved attention, and that's a way for me to keep his memory alive and be noticed.